Indrajit, in your blog, you made a very interesting observation, and I quote you. You said, it's a pity that not many of the PAP new candidates, especially those slated to take on ministerial positions, stood out during GE 2015. What did you mean by this?
You know, for the same reason I said that we're already very late in identifying the fourth generation leadership, especially the fourth generation Prime Minister. Some of them should have taken every opportunity that they had to show themselves. In fact, I was speaking with many young Singaporeans, and many of them wanted to hear from this new generation to see what they stand for and then make their decision. So there were quite a number that were disappointed because they did not show themselves during the...
What do you mean by show themselves?
Make impactful speeches, talk about what they stand for.
A lot of scripted speeches. I noticed a lot of scripted speeches.
They were scripted, and so no one really stood out to have made significant points or had a mind, that...
Did they not stand out because they didn't want to, or they can't?
No, so that's a guess right now. I don't think so, it's can't. I think maybe they themselves may have taken a safe approach during the hustings. And okay, now they have the chance, they've taken the position, but they have to do it very quickly because they don't have the time. We want to have someone who emerges very clearly as a leader who's going to bring Singapore to the next phase of development, and so they missed that one opportunity. I think during the elections, it was a good opportunity, and some of the opposition candidates did show themselves quite well, I would say. I wish that some of our potential ministers and prime ministers could have done it. Yeah. But I would like to see them doing it right now, given that they have now that they've been given their cabinet position, their leadership position, so they have to show themselves very quickly, win over the young Singaporeans.
Yeah, thanks. This is a good time to throw it open to the floor. Yes, anyone with the first question, Mike? Yeah.
Just to follow on the point about how much pluralism or diversity we can expect in cabinet, it's noteworthy that the two full ministers, the two newbie faces, if you like.
The acting ministers.
Yes, acting ministers come from the establishment. So, that sends a very strong signal that only if you're cut out in a certain way, then...
Ong Ye Kung, not so much establishment. He came from Keppel Corporation.
He was DS and NTI before this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And then NTUs.
And PPS to PM.
PPS to PM.
Exactly. So there's still that perception that people will draw from this. There is a broader issue as well, which is a nervously close relationship between the civil service and the ruling party, in that you see very senior civil servants being plucked out from their positions and parachuted into ministerial positions. So, coming to the point about civil society, you are right in that some of those exhortations about the role of civil society are not new. George Hyo made a wonderful speech about pruning the banyan tree many decades ago. And even during the last election, before GE 2011, Tharman made a similar comment about how Singaporeans, it is good for Singapore to have, it's good for the ruling party to have good opposition. So yes. Again, those exhortations are not new. I agree with Alex that there should be no determining as to the role of the opposition. We have craved for a diversity of leadership and views. And at this point, I'm going to be cheeky, Vishwan. I'm going to turn over to you. You made a comment after the elections that you read the elections as signaling a disconnect between the intelligentsia and Singaporeans. I'm going to ask other people about what they think about that, and maybe you could.
Yeah. My point in an article I wrote on IQ was that Catherine Lim talked about the great affective divide between the government and the people. Looking at the results of this election, it looks like the affective divide could very well be between the intelligentsia and the people. I'm not sure where that affective divide is, because obviously for a vast majority of the people, the bread and butter issues were more important. And I think, Alex, you pointed to that as well.
Yes. I mean, I've always felt that bread and butter issues have never been given their due when we discuss the politics of Singapore, the electoral politics. I think those of us who discuss politics tend to kind of like overrate the issues that we ourselves
Yeah.
are concerned with, but on the whole, people aren't necessarily with you. But to talk about the affective divide, you kind of like have to ask yourselves, in any other country, why would there even be any discussion of affection or affective divide between governments and people or between intelligentsia and people? They each do their own thing, and the people can and do vote out the government every now and then. So I don't think there's any need to kind of like cry over whether or not there is any affective divide. It's a very insightful comment made by Catherine Lim in the 1990s, but it may be a little out of date now when we try to be a more normal democracy fighting our way around.
Yeah. Walter, what are your thoughts about this?
I think if there is, or if there was an effective divide the last election, I think it was between the opposition and the people, not between the PAP and the people. I think frankly a lot of members who were standing for the opposition lost touch with actually the voters. They were going out there basically telling voters, your life is terrible, right? And we in the opposition recognize your life is terrible, we're going to fight the PAP. But actually 70% of the people say, you know, my life is not that bad after all, actually. So I think that's the issue. I mean, this is more, I think, about the weakness of some of the opposition parties, maybe not so much the Workers' Party and the SDP, but certainly if you look at the other parties, I mean, it's hard to fathom what exactly they thought they were going to achieve. I mean, clearly they all knew they were going to lose most probably the election, but I'm sure none of them thought they would lose as badly as they did, and probably some of them wouldn't have actually gone up to stand if they knew they were going to walk away with 20%, you see. So, and I think the reason why they did go up to stand was that they seriously overestimated discontent in the public.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I think we should not underestimate the bread and butter issues that are still issues that people are concerned about right now. And that the swing, the 10% swing that we saw this time was a large part was because of a national swing that occurred for a number of reasons. And I wrote a piece about this, that there were 3 things that will never repeat itself in the next 50 years.
Yeah.
SG50, the passing of our founding Prime Minister, and perhaps even the Pioneer package. And a couple of things like that. So that was one issue I think that helped the swing. But underlying issues of bread and butter issues, particularly the problem has shifted from the lower income to the middle income. And that is a big group. And I suspect that the biggest swing, it was a big group, and they swung the way of the PAP in this election because they realized the importance of a strong government, and so that, you know, we can have a strong economy and they can have good jobs. And I think that played a part. I spoke with some of them, you know, when they went to the polling booth, thought of voting for the opposition, thought about it, that in case everyone does that, you know, there will be a swing the other way, and that may affect the stability of Singapore, and also our plans for the 4th generation leadership. And they made a change at the last minute. But the underlying factors are still there, which I mentioned in the piece that I wrote.
So, Indigit, let me ask you this. I'm going to put it very bluntly. Do you feel that after this GE, the political leadership, PAP, acknowledged the point that you're making? That this does not necessarily mean that there is full endorsement for the PAP for everything you've done, but it is actually a vote of confidence, but which can be withdrawn if circumstances change significantly or don't change in certain areas.
Yeah. So I think it was a mix of...
Because you use the word arrogance in your blog.
Yeah. You know, there were a mix of factors. So there was a part of the swing that was for the reasons that I mentioned. But I think there was also endorsement of the changes that the PAP government put in place in the last 5 years or 4 years before this election. And they did address many of the issues that concern Singaporeans, you know, earlier on, including rethinking the numbers in the population white paper. So I think that part of it was that, part of it was a national swing, and part of it was also, I think, a popular Prime Minister and a Deputy Prime Minister that people.
That's two people.
That and these two people are going to drive the style of the future
see you
generation
smiling,
in the new. So I think yes, I use this word that don't take this trust that Singaporeans have given to you for granted, because they can withdraw it, like you said.
Yeah.
If, let's say, we continue doing things the old way. And I think, and I mentioned that also, that it's an opportunity for us to change from a position of strength now, with confidence that you've got the support, people have given you the second chance, I put it. But if we do it wrong, we will not get a third chance. And as George Yeo put it, the pendulum has swung quite in a big way on the other side, and if you're not careful, you can also swing in a big way the other way the next time. So I think knowing this, I'm quite sure that the PAP leadership is going to change its style a bit, maybe not tremendously, and to try to bridge the gap that we talked about.
Well, let's put it this way: they better change their style.
They have to.
No, for their own survival, political survival. Because really, why is it so difficult to be nice? No, I mean, I'm being very honest. I think that's one of the observations. I mean, I spoke to quite a few people, different walks of life, and there's a lot of respect for the PAP as a government. But the common lament is, why can't you all be nice? Why can't you be, nice is a very hard to define word. But when you see someone or something that's not nice, So why is it so difficult? Alex, I'm dying.
No, okay.
You are highly expressive, no? Your
there are several things that he said that I think calls for a little more
you can tahan
elaboration.
lama.
Okay. But, and it goes to your earlier statement about the style of the government and all that, about being nice and all this. And really, sometimes the style of we must not treat the government as a thing, a single thing. The government style will change depending on who is in charge. Really, I think your question, why can't people be nice? There are some people on this earth who are just going to be nasty from the day they were born to the day they're going to die, and they just can't change. I'm not saying that means anything in our cabinet, but there are such people on this earth, and it's very hard to expect, therefore, a tiger to completely change its stripes. We just have to live with the animal we've got in that government. They're good at what they do, and sometimes you need to be just thankful for that. But going forward, I want to take up this point about what they endorsed or what they learned from it. I think it's very interesting exercise here, and it must of course remain a theoretical exercise at this point. I foresee that they have figured out that infrastructure failure, and which is now why they have a coordinating minister for infrastructure
and a fixer.
A fixer.
He's known to be a
Infrastructure failure has dire electoral results, right? When the housing problem just goes out of control, when people are squeezed on the transport and public transport, that has dire results. I'm not so sure about immigration, though. You touched on it about because if you look at the election results, the opposition candidates who went on loudest about 6.9 million did worst. And if I were the PAP, the way I would read it is, that gives us a bit more slack after this election, especially when we've got economic headwinds and we need to keep this economy moving. And already they're hearing a lot of complaints from employers and businessmen about insufficiency of labor, and they need to bring them from abroad. And so I think the endorsement that they're going to read from this result will be limited to the social policies and infrastructure that they have corrected, but they would still have to find that right balance again regarding immigration.
My own sense, my 2 cents worth is, at least from my limited interactions with some cabinet ministers, I think there is a realization after the white paper, for example. I don't think you can erase the memory of the reaction to the white paper that easily. So some of them, I think, they are aware of that challenging balance that you need to strike. You may swing a little bit here and there, but I think they are cognizant of that. Margie, You were going to say something.
I was just thinking we must be the only country in the world where we talk about a dire election result as going from 60, whatever to 60%, and that left the PAP government still firmly in power with no more than 6 opposition seats. And then now we've gone 10 points back, and it's the same situation. So why should they worry unduly? You know, okay, so population badly handled, white paper and all the rest, and way back, the graduate mother debate 1984, which saw a 12-point slide.
Yeah.
They're still firmly entrenched. So what's the big concern?
So what's the big concern?
I mean, and
Kani.
Well, I want to talk something else and pick on Inderjit's point about not getting the fourth generation leadership ready. Now, first of all, in most developed countries with a bipartisan political system, well, people join the Labour Party or the Conservative Party when they're young and they work up the ranks and all that. But in Singapore, here we suddenly parachute civil servants, army generals suddenly who have not worked their way through the party. Now, why do we have a system like this? Why are people so reluctant to admit, oh, I am a PAP party cadre, I'm a PAP member, I'm a workers' party? Why is this, culture so prevalent here? If we had more of a bipartisan system and people open about it, they join the party and then they work through. And the next thing is, why do we need to parachute new people? We have a very eminent and reasonable and popular and much liked person in Dharman. He can always be the next prime minister. So why is this rush to look for new faces and new personalities? I mean, the prime minister is in good health. I'm sure he can stay for as long as he wants to.
I'm reminded of a Shakespearean line in Merchant of Venice. Mistake me not for my complexion.
Well,
maybe
if we talk of meritocracy and we want to prove the point, let's not make it an empty promise. Then it's time to get Dharman as the next prime minister, and then we don't have to worry about, is the fourth generation ready, this ready? He's outstanding. So, let's think about that.
Well, maybe it's an interesting topic for us to discuss, because there have been quite a few interesting commentaries since the GE, and it is a very important issue. Is Singapore ready for a non-Chinese prime minister? And
what do you mean by Singapore ready? Is the cabinet ready?
No.
I mean, what do you mean by Singapore?
Mathematically, the cabinet is part of Singapore. So, as a subset, no. But what are the views of the rest? I'd like to hear the views of the younger generation. You are the 5th generation, not even 4th, huh? 6th maybe. So tell us, what do you all think? Is Singapore ready for a non-Chinese prime minister?
I believe, like, in a meritocratic society, a lot of it we have to look at, like, not the color of his skin or where he's come from. I mean, he has to be Singaporean, but like what he has done, he or she definitely. Yeah, that's another question. Yeah, but we have to look at his capability, his qualities, and I think we have to judge from there. And I believe that, if he is capable, why not?
Good, interesting. Comments from the backbenchers? Yes, please. Could we pass the microphone, please?
With regard to the next PM, I think the problem, I mean, I have great respect for Salman, and I certainly think he's probably the best the PAP has to offer. He's fantastic, but I think the issue is that I believe Lee Hsien Loong is about 63 and Salman is 58. So it's probably the age difference that's not so wide. That's why he's not being considered for the next PM. They probably want someone younger who can take the PAP
I
for the
guess
next
the issue has come
couple
up
of decades.
I guess the issue has come up because PM has actually said that he may step down soon, and if so, who is the next person?
I think whether Singapore is ready, I think generally yes, if it's an outstanding person like Tharman, for example. I think if that's the person, we're going to look up to someone to lead us and get out of difficulties in the future. I think he will probably be an acceptable person. But he's got a good point, the person from the audience just now. that I think the issue here and is not so much of whether he's a non-Chinese, is that he's a contemporary of,
Sure.
Lee Hsien Loong. And I personally feel that it will be quite reckless for us to have an interim prime minister for a short period of time, jeopardizing the future, fourth generation leadership, who could run Singapore for another 15 to
No, but
20 years.
Indrajit, I think the point here is, if that is the argument, then why isn't that argument brought up? Why? But that argument is not the central argument, right? The argument that has been presented is that Singapore is not ready, and even if you have a non-Chinese prime minister, he must be able to speak Mandarin. These kind of.
can learn.
I mean, so the question is, what you said makes sense. What you said makes sense, but we are now talking about, even in the future generations, there might be another Tharman, a younger Tharman that comes up, who is not Chinese. Should the instincts be, if you're not Chinese, you're not going to be accepted?